Hey everybody, Alex here. I'm a small home gardener in southeast Michigan, and I am lazy and I am cheap. And even for my low maintenance plants, I try to figure out ways to make them even lower maintenance. Plants like tomatoes, which for me are typically not very fussy, but I really just don't want to waste my time later in the season doing things I don't want to do. So I'm going to show you what I do to take care of my tomatoes. So I will basically do everything in my power to not buy fertilizer. All my fertilizer is produced on my own little property here. And so I've got my little compost bin going in back. This is last season's compost. It's been chilling all fall, winter, and spring. This is this year's compost, which I'll plan to be using either by the end of this year or next year. So this is part of the gardens where I'm placing my tomatoes. It gets full sun. It's getting just shaded just a tiny bit by these maple trees over in the background here. But I've already dug out my holes. I space my tomatoes just a tiny bit close. They kind of rub elbows by the end of the season. But I've got a nice big hole, almost about a foot across, way more space than that tomato really needs because of what I'm going to do in this hole. So here I've got a little wagon full of my compost from last season. You can see there's all kinds of yummy nummy bits in there. I have a fence to keep critters out. If you're going to have things like, you know, bones or other kitchen scraps in your compost, you might get dug up by critters, so just kind of be aware of that. If you compost and you don't want critters in there, you might not want to use things like bones, because they will find them and they will dig them up. Get a nice generous scoop here. Kind of like one really big handful. Get it on over here, plop it into the bottom of the hole there. And that's what I'm going to do all the way across here, is just fill them with a nice generous heaping blob of that compost. And as these tomatoes grow, those roots are going to branch out into this yummy nummy, nutrient-rich gunk, and that'll feed the plants pretty much all season long. You really should not have to deal with fertilizing it or really tending to your tomatoes in any way. All right, so now that my little dugout hole is filled with compost, I'm going to take my my little seedling here. This is a breed of tomato I really like. It's called Purple Cherokee. They're extremely productive, not very fussy, pretty low maintenance, even as far as tomatoes go. Get those in there nice and situated. I set my tomatoes pretty deep because these fine little hairs that are on the tomatoes, those will actually turn into roots. Those are little nascent roots. And sometimes you can even see some of these little nodules on these tomatoes starting to form. Some of those can actually grow into roots. So if you actually cover them up a little bit with some soil, they will actually put out more roots if they need them. Just mostly burying those stems. Get those guys nice and covered in there. I pack them in fairly well. I like to leave a little depression here. Makes it easier for watering because then when you water these guys, if you ever water them, the water kind of puddles in that area and stays there. I have really sandy soil, so if I'm not careful, I have to water all the time. But as I said, I'm very lazy and I really don't like to water a lot during the summer. So I keep a little depression here, which I will later mulch over so that these guys both get a really generous amount of water when it rains, or if I water them, and then some mulch to help with that moisture retention. Go ahead and water that guy in. Really generous like. We're good to go. That'll drain down over the next couple of minutes. Really saturate this whole area. So if you're a cheap and lazy home gardener like me and you don't want to have to be fertilizing your tomatoes or other crops all season long, that's something that you can try. Just fill a hole with compost and away you go.